now we have Solana and Solana versus Sui and Aptos.
Yep.
This is like becoming a very trending topic these days. Solana, I guess, introduced C-level about a year and a half ago. What is C-level? Which it's essentially the ability to execute transactions in parallel versus how Ethereum does it today, which is like single-threaded. Yep. And so what does that mean? Well, if I'm submitting a transaction on Ethereum, Ethereum would mine transactions one by one. So it's kind of like an typical ordering system, and is batched into, in order, and it'll execute transactions one by one. Whereas with C-level, and I guess similarly with Sui and Aptos, it will execute transactions in parallel. So as long as they're not dependent, more or less. And we'll talk more about what that means.
A big misconception that people have towards Aptos and Sui is the parallelization. They think that Aptos and Sui are the ones that pioneered, but it's actually Solana. Like, parallelization has been done already for a long time on Solana. So
why wasn't it a big deal then? It's all about the narrative.
It's all about the narrative. And in fact, if you talk to developers who are building on Aptos and Sui, the thing that attracts them is not parallelization, is the move language, right? So interestingly, I think we mentioned this before, but I think I want to say maybe 70% to 80% of developers on Aptos and Sui come from Solana. And I've been thinking about this, the reasons behind it for a while. I think the most obvious reason is just that Move conceptually and syntactically are more similar to Solana Rust than to like Solidity, right? Both enable parallelization, both are statically typed, and syntactically it's like, I think they all come from the C++ family. Interestingly, I've had one founder tell me that, actually, maybe some background first. So the Aptos move is the original move from Facebook, right? Whereas the Sui move is modified move. And one founder told me that the Aptos Sui is actually more similar to Solana move. Solana Rust in many ways than it is to Sui. And fundamentally, so one interesting similarity is in both Solana. Oh, sorry. No, I take it back. Sui is more similar to Solana than it is to Aptos.
That's right.
And one interesting similarity is in both Solana and Sui, the developer has to declare their own dependencies. So in this philosophy, the responsibility of identifying parallel transactions is put on the developers. Okay. Whereas in Aptos, the responsibility of identifying parallelizable transactions is put on the shoulders of the virtual machine. And it's done at runtime. And it's something what they call the block STM. And that's something that came out of Facebook. Sui doesn't use block STM. Sui's philosophy is philosophically is a little bit more similar to Solana. And so as a result, I have founders tell me that the Aptos move, the original move, is easier to work with than Sui move and Solana Rust. So Aptos move is a higher level language. And I can relate to it because 10 years ago, I wrote a lot of C++. And it was so painful for me. C and C++ are some of the most painful languages. And at some point, I moved from C++ to Java. And my entire world changed. Like Java, whatever you do, it just works. It just compiles. You don't run into like bullshit issues like segmentation fault. Like you don't have to manage your own memory and all that stuff. So Java is a higher level language than C++. There's trade-offs, of course, because C++ is faster. Java is easier to work with. So developer experience is on Aptos Move reminds me of Java, whereas Sui and Solana are more analogous to C++. But anyway, so that's something I learned anecdotally. Very interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So it seems like Aptos is much more developer friendly than Sui. primarily because block STM, which stands for software transaction memory, it essentially allows you to pre-order and divide transactions optimistically, and then we'll validate it and then check for any dependencies and then invalidate the transaction if there's dependencies caught, right? So essentially, block STM does all the ordering and then checks for dependencies and then will optimistically validate the transactions. Whereas with Sui, Sui will give the developer more control to call out transactions whether they're dependent or not, which requires more work on the front end for developers, right?
Yep.
So there's very interesting dynamics there. You have one that does it for the developer, and then you have Sui that gives the more power to the developer to call out the transactions. What do you think about the two? And which one do you think? Obviously, it seems like you like what Aptos and Block STM is doing.
No, I think both have their merits. Like neither is strictly better than the other, right? It's very hard to say at the end of the day. But providing a good developer experience is critical for success. And anecdotally, I heard from Solana founders that both the Aptos and Sui developer tooling, surprisingly, is better than Solana.
Get out of here.
Because Solana has been around for like 2-3 years now, whereas Aptos and Sui are much newer. Well, I mean, obviously they've done many years of work at Facebook, but surprisingly, the dev tooling is better on Aptos and Sui.
Well, Solana just announced that they're going to be supporting Move.
Yep.
Did you see that?
Yep.
I think it's about a year away, less than a year away. And so I guess, there's this huge battle between Solana, Aptos, and Sui. We have some of the developers moving away from Solana to Sui and Aptos. Primarily, I think it's just transaction throughput, right? So like the bottlenecks and the chain being halted is an issue for some developers. And so they're seeing some of these people move. Do you think with Solana moving to Move or supporting Move, do you think that they'll still have the competitive edge? Like, where do you see this all play out?
At the end of the day, I want to touch on a point that I brought up at the beginning of this session, which is that we, as analysts or whatever you want to call it, can spend all day researching the theoretical aspects, merits, trade-offs of each chain. But at the end of the day, the only thing that matters in the early stage is developer adoption. It's the momentum, right? Aptos and Sui are clearly gaining momentum right now at the expense of Solana. And I think the Solana people are aware of it. I think Anatoly sees a lot of good things in Aptos and Sui, and also thinks them as direct competitors to Solana. And by the way, there's anecdotally, there's a few big Solana investors that are pushing their portfolio companies to switch from Solana to Aptos and Sui.
How do you feel about that? I mean, there's just a lot of FUD around Solana, it seems like. And there's this concept of mercenary and missionary founders that you and I always talk about.
Yep.
Yeah, so let's unpack that.
The thing that is unclear to me is how missionary the developers on Aptos and Sui are, because a lot of them come from Solana. Some of them come from Ethereum and some of them are new, but a lot of them, I think the majority of them come from Solana.
Do you think that's a good thing or bad thing? I mean, for me, as an example, I want to attract net new developers. Obviously, we'll get some developers from all of the other ecosystems, and that's fine. But to me, having organic pull from net new developers is a great signal. Just, vampire attacking or attacking or attracting other layer 1 developers from one specific ecosystem may not be the best strategy, because what you're doing is you're attracting, mercenary founders versus missionary founders. So curious to hear your thoughts on that.
The developer level of loyalty is certainly a big problem for new chains in general. It's not specific to Aptos or Sui or anything. But at the end of the day, I feel like for most new developers that are new to Web3, they couldn't care less about loyalty towards the underlying ecosystem. At least maybe in 5 to 10 years, choosing between Aptos, Sui, Solana, or Ethereum Cosmos is basically choosing from AWS or Google Cloud or Microsoft Azure, right? Whatever works for them for attracting funding, for attracting users.